into the chat because we have some free lesson plans that we would love to send you that are appropriate for spring and spring break. So in order to do that, we would need your name and your email address, and we promise not to drive you crazy, but we might communicate with you once in a while. So welcome, we're glad you're here, but please let us know who you are so that we can send you these free spring break type lesson plans. So welcome to everybody, and we're here tonight to talk about and really share some information about being aware of mental health for kids. And you know, pre-COVID, nobody much talked about that. But since COVID, we've talked about that a lot, and we've heard a lot more about social and emotional learning and helping young people to determine what their emotions are, whereas too often they are just either happy or mad, right? And there's such a range of emotions that they don't understand. So really thinking about mental health and how it's so important for all of us. And it's a shame that it took a pandemic to get our attention, right? Because it's something that we just haven't talked about much before. So that's the topic for tonight. We're going to talk about mental health and being aware of mental health when we're working with young people. So we're glad you're here. I'm the doctor, and I'm going to just let the coach say hello.
Hello. Hey, and can you give a brief defining or definition of the difference between mental and emotional? Like, do you have a distinct difference between the two?
I think that they're very similar in a lot of ways. So mental health means it, and I know this is kind of a poor analogy maybe, but what's your worldview? Do you see the world as a glass half empty or as a glass half full? Do you tend to see the world in a positive light where some bad things happen once in a while? Or do you see the world as a bad place where once in a while, if you're lucky, that's good? You know, that's just lucky for you because it was a good thing. And I think mental health has also to do with that whole range of well-being. Well-being isn't a singular thing. Now, ultimately, you have a collective feeling of well-being, but there's well-being that has to deal with how you interact with your family and friends. There's well-being about how you take care of yourself and how you interact with people socially. There is well-being when it comes to your career. And for a kid, their career is school, but someday that's going to lead to a financial piece. So it's well-being. It's also well-being about around your spiritual life, whether that's a religion or that's a spiritualness that you feel connected to the world. And then there's your physical health, but those senses of well-being play in to your mental health. So emotional health is part of your mental health, but your mental health, I believe, is more encompassing of all those areas. Whereas emotional well-being is, can you identify your emotions? Can you understand what you're feeling and how you can mitigate that? Whereas social health is when you feel comfortable in your own skin in front of other people and you're willing to share. So I think that mental health is probably the big bucket that holds all those smaller buckets. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is because I think a lot of times the reason I brought that up is because I think a lot of times people are like me, they're clumpers and they clump
Yeah,
that together. And so I think to separate that, even though the big umbrella, would look like mental health, but the emotions is a part of that, just
hmm,
like physical. But I think
yes,
because the emotional and the mental are kind of more brain waves,
hmm,
and then it's easier to separate the physical. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and I think that's a good designation that emotions are, how are you feeling and or thinking, but probably more on the feeling side of things would be more of your emotions, and
right.
then and the mental is overall, and I like that.
Right. And you know, with emotional health, you cannot, so for instance, if you scare me, if I'm sitting and I'm very focused and I don't see you come up and you scare me, I'm going to have a physical reaction to that. I'm going to jump, but I'm also going to have a chemical surge through my body to tell me that I should be afraid, right? And then I can calm down if I recognize the person. But if not, I'm going to be able to either move to one of the three, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And so an emotion is triggered by something. But what happens is that we feel it somewhere in our body. So for instance, when you are upset, where do you feel that? Is it in your chest? It is, right? You're feeling it somewhere. And then we try and bring it up into our brain so that we can categorize it and get a hold of it. But all of that happens, and that's why it contributes to your mental health, right? Because you can go down a rat hole and say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Or you can say, okay, let's look at this in a positive way. What could I learn from this experience? How can I move forward?
Right. And you forgot that when you were talking about the glass half full or half empty or 90% full and ready to tip over.
Yeah, right. And sometimes that's the case, right? We just experience that. So I think that.
Uh-oh. She froze on us, Robert.
And being in tune with this.
You froze for a second.
I said it's hard enough with your mental health to know where you are. And when you work with kids, if you have 5 kids, 15 kids, 35 kids, whatever you have, and trying to figure out how to support them, because they're going to be having their own set of issues, I think is challenging, which is part of the reason we really wanted to have this topic tonight, because sometimes spring can bring anxiety. They've been hard at work since January, and they're maybe getting ready for a spring break, but it's never quite long enough, right? And then we're going to take, if they're in school, they're going to be headed into testing. And that can also always be kind of challenging for kids. So that's why we really kind of wanted this topic either to this week or in the next week or two, we would have been doing it because it's really important. So Robert, do we have questions?
Yeah. Yes, our first question is, why is mental health awareness important for youth programs?
I think it's important because we try in youth programs that are youth development programs, which look at young people as assets to be developed, not problems to be fixed. When we look at them, we're looking at the whole child. And I know that that's kind of a cliche term, but if I'm a reading tutor, what I care about is that you're learning to read better. That's where I'm going to focus. I'm going to give you all the skills I can to help you read better. If I'm tutoring you in math, the same thing is true for math. But when we take a look at whole children, what we're doing is saying, look, not only do we care about your academics, we care about your life skill development, we care about how you face every day, how you're able to persist, how you're able to learn from past situations, how you're able to manage your own emotions. We're looking at you holistically. And I think that that's why it's so important, because in expanded learning, we don't have that singular focus of test scores. We have a much broader focus, which I would call overall well-being of a child. And we need to be very aware. And I just want to say one more thing about that. When we work with elementary children, they are in a classroom during the school day with one person. And that one person will help to monitor that ebb and flow so that they have some downtime and then they have some uptime and so forth. But if you think about middle school and high school kids, they have 6 people minimally, and they all want 100% of them. And they want it for the entire hour that they're there. There's nobody managing that ebb and flow of mental health, of how you feel. How's this moving forward for you? Are you feeling confident? Are you feeling competent? Right? And so I think when those older kids come to expanded learning, it's even more important that we are focused on your mental health, because we are going to look at you more holistically to begin with. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word underlying in the question, right? That what's important about it, and I think you covered that really well. The only thing I'll add to that is I think that early and often is that if you can, so I look at, me, I'm always doing processes, right? So early and often, what's the identification of that for you as the adult, but also helping them to recognize in themselves? Because a lot of time what happens when we talk about the overall emotions of the mental umbrella, that we're reacting out of that emotion versus responding out of intellect, and we've talked about that before. So I think identification and then early intervention, right? Because if you let that emotion fester, so to speak, then that's where, especially if it's over days, weeks, months, whatever, that's really when it becomes a mental problem, not just an emotional one timer. You're hooking all these things together like the little monkeys. So I think that early intervention can prevent the longer term mental issues. And I think that the other thing is that just promoting the awareness of it, and that it's okay. You feel what you feel, right? I get up at 3 o'clock this morning, and I haven't felt good all day, but I still had plenty of things to do, right? I had to do three major things by 11 o'clock in the morning, as well as being able to get my afternoon situated, which weren't as major, but I'm already beat tired. And then now we have the podcast at the end of it, where you want to be up for the people, because as they're asking questions or as we're getting questions, you want to give them the best. So I think that the promoting of that and understanding that, and that really turns into a lot of things you talked about over the last few weeks with emotional intelligence and fostering resilience and a stronger peer-to-peer interactions, and right, all of those things that are these auxiliaries. And so if we look at it as a Thanksgiving dinner, yeah, the turkey is the big picture of the mental awareness, but you have all these auxiliaries that are contributing to that in a positive, a negative, or a neutral way.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, Robert, do you have another question?
Yes, your next question is, how can I identify signs of mental health challenges in youth?
I think that one of the ways I would call it like the yo-yo, right? They're high, then they're low. They are overly excited, and then they are just withdrawn. You're seeing a lot of polar opposites. Instead of staying in the center lane, they're either far right or far left. And so if you see that and it goes on for more than just like a day, everybody can have a day like that, maybe even two. But when it starts to be a pattern, so I think that if you think of an iceberg, right? When you see this yo-yo effect, that's like the tip of the iceberg. And so you're going to start to watch that, because what you're looking for is this a pattern of behavior? Is this something that I see repeated over and over and over? And if it is, then you need to take steps. And maybe you're not the person who needs to have the conversation with them. Maybe you feel like it's beyond you, or maybe just a simple word from you, if you have a really powerful relationship with a child, can help them to start to consider how they're feeling, right? And what's going on inside of them. And there are days, I don't care who we are, that we have self-doubt. We wonder, is this the day I'm going to fall flat on my face? We wonder, was this worth it? Did I make a right choice? And if you live in that arena, and that's where you stay and spend most of your time, that's going to wear on you. And so I think the word fail, Fail, that really should stand for first attempt in learning, instead of the sky is falling, right? But I think that young people, especially if they have junior high and early high school, that failure rings loud in their ears, and they don't translate it to, well, I failed this class or I got an F on the test. They translate that to, I am a failure. I am no good. I am not capable. I am not confident. And when those iMessages come to us, I think that that's very problematic. And so we want to watch for that. We want to hear, there's one thing to be self-deprecating, kind of make a joke at your own expense, but it's quite another to operate in the world as if you are less than, if you are not enough, because we all are enough. Now we can choose to work harder and become something different, but we need to know that we're enough, and we're going to be able to have agency over our own life. So I think that that's what I would be looking for, is swings, these erratic swings, and then this beyond self-deprecating humor, but really viewing yourself as not enough. So I'll pitch that to you, Brett, because I know that you've worked a lot with people around this.
Yeah, you and I most of the time. Not Robert though. He's perfect in all ways, shapes, and forms. Yeah, so I think about the process first, and I think we need to observe, right? So if you look at the continuum, it's us as the adult and the youth. So whatever we're doing, we want to make sure that we're teaching them. So I think that the observation, I was writing a bunch of notes as you were talking, but observation is a big deal. Then going back to what we said next is the identification, right? Let's really try to pinpoint that, right? And me, because of being a PE teacher and growing up so in such a physical way, I think of all the physical stuff. So running a parallel with the doctor, right? You don't go, oh yeah, my thing over here that's by my ear and my head, and yeah, it kind of hurts. No, you want to pinpoint it. You want to be able to say, hey, my deltoid or my latissimus dorsi on the medial side. So every way that we can identify, we get into prevention versus intervention. So what was the trigger? Because usually there's a trigger that starts to create these emotions, which leads to the bigger problem of the mental situation. And then again, for me, which you talked about, but I'll just overemphasize that, is the physical, right? What am I seeing in them? Is it a slumped shoulders? Is it that their head's down? Is it that, right? Is it their language? Even if they're speaking it, is it negative? Is it down? Cause I'm pretty hyper, right? Like I'm usually up and jumping around. Like, I'm sure I got ADD, ADHD, and every other D in the whole wide alphabet there. And so if I was more calm or chilled or slow or whatever, that could be the signal or the signs and the identification that maybe something's wrong. So I think we really need to know our students as a collective whole, but also individually, so that we can have an understanding. Because if my wife was in chill mode, it's because she chilled, right? That's who she is. That's not what she does. So if she started to talk faster and whatever, then I would be like, wait a minute, what the heck's going on here? Was there, a medication thing, or did something happen earlier? Because we all would get that, right? When you were talking earlier about if I went boom, we would all be like, what the heck's going on? We would be on high alert, so to speak. So I think that monitoring the physical signs, I think also the verbal signs, the behavioral signs, it could be withdrawing, it could be going, too much the other direction. So I think that these are the things that really help to identify the signs of where is the person, and then also as the adult, based off of how that's happening, how are you responding versus reacting, right? And so I think that's a lot. There's a lot of dynamics there, and we've got to get to know ourselves first. I always say, know thyself first, and then know others, right? And we've done a whole course on that where we start with sure self-awareness, right? You need to understand you before you can understand others and how you would interact with that as a group and a team.
Absolutely. No, that's so true. And it's, it sounds so easy to do, but it's not. It's challenging. And it's challenging to know one and then just multiply it, right? By however many kids you interact with. So if you're a site coordinator, it might be 200, 250 kids. If you're a frontline staff member, it might be 20 kids, right? That's different. Or in a classroom, if you're a teacher, it might be 30 kids or 35. And so it's much more challenging. Uh, and fortunately, most things kind of work themselves out. But if you're aware and you're observing, I agree, observation is critical so that you can tune into them. What do you say, the WIIFM, right? What's in it for them? Not for you, but what's going on with them.
Yeah, let's tune in at the FM dial of your radio station.
Yep, not our own. So if somebody's joined us recently and didn't hear me say at the beginning, if you will put in the chat your name and your email address, we'll be happy to send you some spring break lesson plans and activities that you can do with kids that are hands-on, minds-on, and quite engaging. So Robert, if there's another question, let's go with that.
Next question is, what roles does active listening play in supporting mental health?
You want to start with that one, Brett?
Well, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, first, I think it validates their emotions, right? Because I think a lot of times we think that emotions, which lead to that broader picture of mental challenges or good things, either direction. I think a lot of times that what we do or we don't do is we're just a stone wall, right? We're not actively listening by shaking our heads or paraphrasing or what I heard you say was this or whatever the case may be. And I think it's okay for people to feel the way they feel, to think the way they think. Now, maybe the way they would like to react on those things may not be the best. And that's why we say we don't want to react. We want to respond. And we respond out of intellect. And what we do is we get ourselves into trouble if we react out of emotions. And that's what we want to make sure that, ultimately we're not doing. So, and I think some people just actively listen in a superior way than others, right? They're just natural at it. If you look at, I was listening to an interviewer interviewing an interviewee, but they actually were both interviewers, really, but one was on the other person's show today. And it was very interesting because what they both do is they naturally were actively listening and paraphrasing. They were engaged. And that's what you want to be able to, to do with them so that they can understand that whatever they're feeling is okay, whatever they're thinking is okay. It's just, what are you going to do with that in the aftermath? That's where you can either, be a hero or get yourself into a little bit of trouble.
For sure. While you were talking about active listening, it's like, so how can you teach somebody about listening, right? Because in Western culture, which is where we all live, we tend not to listen. We tend to debate. I'm right, you're wrong, be quiet, and go with what I say. And then sometimes we get nicer about that and we go, okay, let's discuss it. And the whole time somebody else is talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say back to them, right? And so that's not listening either. So one of the, an activity that you can do that really helps people learn how to listen is called inside-outside circles. So you take your group and you divide them in half. And you have the first group come and make a circle. And they're not touching each other. They don't have to hold hands, but they make a circle. And then you ask them to turn their backs to each other. Now that's going to be your inside circle. And then you ask the other half of the people to go and stand in front of one of those people in the inside circle. And if you have one too many because you have an odd number, then you can let two stand together. Anyway, so what you do is you give them something to talk about. And it doesn't matter what it is that you talk about, but I would try and have it not be something that's going to cause friction. But you might say, talk to this person about your favorite restaurant and why you like to go there. And so they both talk back and forth. And then at the end, you don't care a whit about what they talked about. So you're not going to debrief to say, okay, so who liked what restaurant? Let's vote for it. That's not your point. Your point is that they were able to talk to each other. And then you ask this question. You say to the people on the inside, if you're in the inside circle, tell the people on the outside circle how you knew they were listening. What did they do? What did they do that told you they were listening to you? And they will say things like, well, they were looking at me. They leaned forward. They nodded their head. They asked me a question that was relevant. They asked me if they had clear understanding, right? They will give you all those reasons. And then you share those all out, and you can make a list of them. And then you ask the outside circle to tell the inside circle how they knew that what they were talking about, it was important to them. Because a lot of times we talk and nobody's listening because we don't really care, because we're just jabbering. But how did you know? And so they will say, well, they were so enthusiastic and they were so eager. Anyway, what you've done is you've identified the two sides of active listening, right? These are things you can do to show that you're listening. And here are things you should do so that people want to listen to you. Then what you do is you rotate one of the two circles and you have them talk about something, again, that's totally whatever you want. What's your favorite car? What's your favorite color? Whatever. And then you ask them. Now it means to listen actively. This is what I need to do if I'm going to portray listening actively. And then you give them two practices. And I have found that that's very helpful for people, because a lot of times people go, active listening, what the heck is that, right? I mean, I'm always listening. Well, are you, or are you distracted? And so it's really not being distracted. But if you want to try that as an activity to help people understand what active listening looks like, you will see that they improve just because they gave suggestions. And you can ask after the second and the third circle, okay, how did you know? What did that person do that let you know that they were listening? And what did they do to let you know that they were worth listening to? So that's an activity you can do.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, because I was taking some notes as you were talking, and I was really thinking about what about individually too, right? Like we need to actively listen to ourselves. What is our self-talk? What are we saying? Because if you're saying negative stuff all the time, and for some people that could be motivating, right? Like if somebody told me back in the day, I'm sure you could let everybody know, if they said you can't do that, right? I'd go do it just to prove them wrong, right? And so something negative like that for me was fine. So I can talk negative to myself, and it inspires me or motivates me. And then, like you were talking about, where you have a partner. But then, what about when it's in a small group of, let's say, 4? How do you do that? And then, what about if it's like, let's say, half of your class? What about if it's the entire class? What about if it's you and you're able to say to them, man, it makes me feel great when I see you guys actively listening by shaking your head, or giving a fist pump, or your eye expression, like, oh, that's great, or whatever the case may be. And so, and I think a lot of are all for mental health awareness, identification, and all the above.
Absolutely. And your point about your eyes and all of that, that's really body language. And over 50% of all communication is body language. People read what your body says. And what is confusing is when your words aren't saying what your body's saying, right? And the second part of that is tone, right? There's a tonal quality, and very small percentage is the language you use. But in listening, you need to be listening with your body, and then the tone in which you speak, as much as you are listening with your ears. So listen to the message and listen to the information behind the message as well. So I think that that's all really important. So active listening, we all need to do a lot more of that. Yep, for sure. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion, right? So active listening, Robert. What's next?
Yeah, so next question is, how can I create a safe space for youth to share their feelings?
I think that you create a safe space for kids to share what's going on with them over time. Now, some kids will share right away, but other kids who, especially if they're troubled at all, they will not very often communicate very quickly. So let's say that you believe that kids should feel safe in your program, and that would be physically safe, emotionally safe, and socially safe. That they are respected. They respect themselves, they respect each other, they respect property, and that they accept responsibility. Let's say that those are your three general guidelines for them, and you've worked that through with them. Well, the way you do that is to consistently create safe space. So let's say that you want backpacks to go on the hooks, and you have a kid who doesn't put the backpack on the hook. How are you going to deal with that? Are you going to say, how many times do I have to tell you, you got to put your backpack there? If you do that, you'll get the backpack up there, but you haven't created a safe space. So if you say to them, what you've said to that child, that youth, is, it's okay if you mess up here. It's okay. Right? And I'm going to remind you. Now, at some point, you may have to then move from these reminders to some sort of consequence or discipline. But if you do that and accept them and dignify them by not being disrespectful. But I so often, especially when kids are disrespectful, there's the 3 Ds that kids do. They disrupt, they're disrespectful, or they're defiant. And that's the ugly side of it. And they're trying to figure out who the heck they are. And they've probably seen grown-ups do those 3 Ds all the time. But they act that way to you. And your gut instinct is, I'm not putting up with that. I'm not taking your disrespect. Blah, blah, blah. But aren't you demonstrating for them that disrespect is a matter of age? It's okay if you're disrespectful to them, but it's not okay if it's vice versa. So we've got to be really careful, because when kids are troubled, the behaviors are not the best. They're not the easiest to get along with. And so we have to keep ourselves very level. And you can rant and rave when they're not there, if that's what you need to do. But what we need to do, the most disrespectful kid deserves the most respect. Because that way, what you're telling them is, you need to do as I do, not as I say. And I think that that's how you create a safe space, so that you're open, you listen, you don't judge, you don't have an agenda to how to fix them. You sit with them, you let them talk, and you might ask a guiding question, but you're not telling them. They have to feel like it's okay. It's okay to be who I am with you. I can show you warts and all, and it's still okay. You'll still like me. You'll still think that I'm okay. I'll be enough for you. So I think that that's part of creating that safe space.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a story. So when I first started working with the adults, I had 30 AmeriCorps members, and we did a thing that I used to call Jerry Springer, and my mom or my boss said, you better clean that up. And so we wound up calling it OTJ, and I believe somebody later on called it morning meetings with the kids. But what we found was that it was the best time for them. There were times where I created an 8-hour agenda, which would take 8 hours at least to create a good 8-hour agenda. And I had to crumple it up because we OTJ'd for the entire 8 hours. And so I'll explain to you what OTJ is, and I'll explain to you the power of it. But talk about a safe space. When you hear the story or the touch point at the end, you'll be like, wow. And that's the power of creating safe spaces. So OTJ was, and it goes back to what you said earlier. So what we do is we say it's open. It's completely open. There's a bunch of, 30 strangers in here, and we go, it's open. And so they're all looking around and they say nothing, right? They don't do anything at first. So then you say, well, why don't we start with praises? And so then I praise, Dr. Cindy here, and I'm like, oh, I just love your red shirt. And then usually she praise me back, oh, I just love your gray shirt or whatever. Well, what happens is that we start the dialogue. We're starting to create the safe space, because what we would do is we would clap at the end on three, 1, 2, 3, clap. So now we're reinforcing the fact that there was a praise and whatnot. But then what would happen is somebody would get brave. Somebody would get brave and they would say something, and it could be personal or professional, and they would say, hey, I'm having a struggle with dot, dot, dot. And then people would answer that. And we would say, no matter what they say, even if you thought it was the dumbest thing in the whole wide world, you would look at them and say, thank you. Because what we said is that if you go, oh, I've already done that before, or anything else other than thank you, then the learning would stop. And the next time you needed somebody's help, it may be that exact person that you shut down, right? And that's not creating a safe space. So no matter what it was, thank you so much, right? So one time in this AmeriCorps, about halfway through the year, this gal was trying to tell me something, and she couldn't do it, and so then in OTJ she wanted to say it, and she even called me in the middle of the night. I had to wake up my wife, and we all talked, and this was like 2 in the morning. She could not get it out what she was saying, and this poor girl, she had terrible acne. She was uber talented, just amazingly. She was a pretty gal, uber talented, smart as can be, but she was just messed up. She was messed up mentally and emotionally, and it showed in her skin and her face and all the above. And so finally, in OTJ, in front of 30 strangers, she says, I was raped. And that's what she couldn't get out. So you want to talk about a safe space. We created that safe space with 30 strangers over, I think it was in the first quarter, maybe the second quarter, the first semester. And she was able to get that out. And then guess what happened? Within 2 weeks, her face cleared up. The beautiful woman came out, all of her talent. She felt so confident in all the above. So I didn't give any particulars on do this and this and this and this, but that's creating a safe space. And if you can do that with kids and with people, you have to watch the confidentiality. But if you can do that with youngsters with confidentiality, that's the kind of things that can come from it. Just amazing.
Absolutely. I remember her well. She was absolutely turned into a winner because she was able to face her past. So thank you for sharing that. That's so true. So, Robert, do we have anybody else that or a question from the group or anybody else?
Yes, the next question is, what strategies help youth cope with stress and anxiety?
Give them a squishmallow. No.
I was gonna say just clip last week. Deep breathing.
Yes, for sure. So, one of the things, and when you talk about deep breathing, that's really true. And I don't know if I think we've talked about four square breathing, which we say to kids, take a deep breath, and they go, right. And they only take it down about to the tops of their lungs. But with deep breathing, what you do is you have to inhale to the count of four. You hold for the count of four, you exhale to the count of four, and you hold that to the count of four. And so this would be how it would go. You would go inhale, 2, 3, 4, and you have to be breathing in that whole count. And so that you're belly breathing, right? And that's hard. So suddenly your focus is away and you're looking at that. Then you hold for 4, 2, 3, 4. Now try exhaling for 4, right? And that's as hard as inhaling to the count of 4. And then you hold. And so that deep breathing is something that can help you get to a place where you can think and not react. Because what you try and do, here's the stimulus. The more space you can put before you respond, the more likely that response is to be one you'll be proud of. But what happens is that if it's a teeny tiny space, we may not be. So that's why we take deep breaths. Or you tell kids, count to 10. And it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? It's counting slowly. It's doing something to distract you from where you are at that moment so that you can make a choice about how you're going to respond. So I'll
Yeah,
pitch that to you.
yeah. And so obviously, I always go to the physical. You can always do something physical. And I'll tell you something, we used to do the double dip. So, I had 150 kids out there when I was teaching PE, and inevitably, you'd have 2 or 3 kids per period that had asthma. And so when we would try to teach them to deep breathe like that, really from the belly, like where you're supposed to sing from, right? Breathe in and out. So what we used to do, and they'd be complaining about the asthma kids because they don't know what it feels like. So I would say, okay, I want you to take the deepest breath that you can. So they would do that. Okay, now let it out slowly, right? And just that you could count it, just like you said, or whatever. And then I said, oh, okay, so this is what it's like when you're stressed out. I said, I want you to get the straw right here, and I want you to breathe through the straw. And they're like, oh, that's not too bad. I'm like, okay, great. Now I want you to go run a lap. And now I want you to breathe through the straw. And so I said, so when you're anxious and nervous and you're stressed and have anxiety, this is what's going on with you. You can't. So I said, you got to take the deep breath. And I said, oh, by the way, those asthma kids that you're ragging on, that's how they feel sometimes when they're walking, let alone running. And they would be like, oh, I guess I should apologize to them. I said, yeah, maybe you might want to think about it. So we did that as a double dip for the asthma kids, but as well as saying, look, when you're stressed and anxious and nervous, it's like everything clamps up on you. And that's how you're trying to breathe and stress and the physical. So I said, the deep breaths are good, but also I said, go jog, go run, go do something physical, right? And that gets your mind off it, number one. And it also takes all the endorphins out of what's going on in your brain and everything else as you're running or jogging or throwing the frisbee or arm wrestling or doing something else physical. So I think that, coping with stress and anxiety, we always want to do prevention versus intervention. But if you have to intervene, I think the deep breathing or getting physical are good. If you have kids that maybe don't, aren't as physical or don't want to do that, you can do journaling exercises like mindfulness techniques, different things of that nature. I know we do that as a group all the time. We do mindset stuff, prayer, different things of that nature. But I really like the physical part of it. And then I would end with, you can always teach them the problem solving skills as well, starting with, observing themselves, identification, and then what are the steps to be able to make sure that you can, release that and get it down, so to speak.
Yeah, 2 things that what you said reminded me of. The last one was we had this opportunity to see a young person, 4th grader, I think he was, maybe 5th grade. And he was very, very agitated because they'd been out to physical activity and the game had not gone the way he thought it should go. And he was beside himself. And he's ranting and raving at the program leader all the way in. And the program leader very calmly said to him, I think you need to practice your calm down routine, right? And so he started, and you could see him going through this process of calming himself down. And it wasn't easy because he was very agitated. But it took about 5 minutes, and then he was able to go, right? And once he could relax enough to do that, then the leader said, are you ready to come back in and we can talk about it? And he said, yes, he could. And so we can teach kids calm down routines. But I don't know if the other thing I wanted to say is, I don't know if you've seen this commercial, but I have no idea what they're advertising because I never seem to get that part. But it was an effective commercial. There's a lady probably in her 50s, early 50s talking, and she says, I used to smoke to release stress. And then I had to have open heart surgery. And I want to tell you, you need to find some other thing to do to relieve your stress other than smoking, because open heart surgery is pretty stressful. And what it reminded me of is so often we stress over the small stuff. It's not the major, but it's the small stuff. And we're stressing over that to the point that it's going to be a big stressor. And we need to think about that. But yeah, that I've seen that commercial several times, and I don't know what she's advertising to get you to try something else, but that's her point, right? To figure out how to do that. Walk, run, twiddle your finger, do something, but get that energy out.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings too. Let's major and minor in minors, but a lot of times we major in minors, right? We make mountains out of molehills, and it's like, why? We don't need to do that. Life's tough enough without doing that. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I am very guilty of that, right? Of everything is of equal value, and it's like, well, it's all important, and that's hard. It's hard to prioritize and realize that maybe number 10 on the list can be number 10 on the list, right? And I think that that's true, and especially with older youth, right? Where the teacher wants 100%. Every teacher wants 100% of them. So where do they get that chance to just go? And you can do mindfulness activities with kids where they're just becoming present in the moment. And that can give them a minute to just chill. It's like we need to race into the next activity. Maybe what that would serve them better is just an opportunity to chill with their friends. No pressure, it's 10 minutes. We probably could do that with them.
Isn't that what we do with Robert? We tell him to chill.
Absolutely. We
Robert, would you agree with this? Can you confirm or deny that?
Yes, I confirm.
Nothing like putting you on the spot. All right. So you have another question?
Yes, my next question is, how can I address bullying's impact on mental health?
How can you address what?
Bullying?
Oh, bullying. Well, first of all, bullying is not cool, right? And I think that it's really important to talk with kids about what bullying really looks like. I think that some kids would tell you, I'm not bullying them, I'm just being assertive because I know my way is right. And that's not the case, right? It may be right for you, but it may not be right for anybody else. So I think that you have to deal with bullying as what it is. There's the bully, there's the victim, and there's the onlooker. And when Brett was talking earlier about our AmeriCorps program, and that was way back in the 90s, when we ran that, we were very much on the forefront of looking at bullying. In fact, we had to go to Canada to get some ideas around how to address that. And so to understand that bullying, there's a bully who wants their way, and there's a victim who doesn't quite know how to stand up for themselves. Maybe they're smaller, maybe they feel less confident, but then you have these onlookers, which is everybody else, who is either supporting the bully by saying something or like, yeah, right on, or doing absolutely nothing. And on rare occasion, they will support the victim. So I think that it's important. We call that the bully triangle. And I think that you have to address that for what it is. And I think that you have to talk about all the different kinds of bullying there is. There certainly is physical bullying and intimidation. I'm bigger, I'm stronger, right? So you need to do what I say. I have more title power than you have. I'm more respected than you are, so you have to do what I say. But there's also bullying by ostracizing somebody else. I'm not going to let you come in. You are in the out group. And the in group is where I am, and we're good, and you're in the out group, and you're not. So there can be that social bullying that goes on as well. And it's not that girls can't bully physically, because they certainly can, but they often tend to be bullying in that way, in a social way, about doing just ostracizing, and you're not in, and you can't come in, and you're not in the in group. So I think that we have to address bullying itself. And then I think we empower people who tend to be victims to be able to speak their mind in a safe space. So if somebody's bullied and I witness it myself, that's one thing. But let's say I'm not there, because bullies often tend to be quite good at hiding it, right? So that no adult's seeing it. So if some victim comes to me and tells me that they've been bullied, and I go to the bully myself, then I'm in the middle of that and I haven't empowered anybody. I haven't changed the bully, and I haven't empowered the victim. So one of the things, and this happened when I was a principal, there was this second grade girl, and she was just overwhelmed by this boy in her class. And he said things, he pushed her, he did things. And she finally came and talked to me. And I said, okay, we're going to practice right now what you can say to him. And I'm going to go with you while you say it to him. But I'm not saying it for you. But I will go there so that you can feel safe, because I will keep you safe. And so she went and she said to him in iMessages, I feel bad when you say those things to me. I can't stop myself from feeling that way. But that's how I feel. He looked at her and he said, I had no idea. He said, I like you. And you want to go, what? Right? And she said, you don't act like you like me. And so he got a better understanding coming from her than he would have ever gotten from me. He would have been mad at her for telling on him. But when she confronted him, and we had to practice, I promise you, she wasn't able to do that out of the chute. But when she told him how that made her feel, and that she couldn't stop feeling it that way, and sometimes she felt that way all the rest of the day and the next day too, he was dumbfounded. And he said, I'm sorry. And he stopped doing it. So I'm not going to tell you that that happens every time. It doesn't. But I do think that we have to let victims tell bullies themselves, and we can go and support them. But my doing it is not going to be helpful in the long run.
Yeah, I think too, because that's where I was going to go, is that whole program that we started back in the day. But I wanted to add in there real quick before I go there, cyberbullying too. That's a big deal that we didn't have to deal with when we were younger back in the day. So I like the bully triangle, and I like not getting in the middle of it to where you're the go-between. What you want to do is get on the outside and work with each grouping within that, each point, so to speak. So we spent a lot of time with the onlookers. And so the way that the AmeriCorps program worked is that we had one adult, and they had a caseload of like 4 to 8 kids. And what they would do is actually walk around with them and be like the old school Jiminy Cricket, right? Who would kind of talk in their ears, so to speak. And how would that look and feel? And how do you stand up for yourself? And how do you be assertive without being aggressive? How do you not just let somebody run over the top of you? And so, and we did all of that. But, and then the bully we worked on too, a lot of times the bully, it was so deep seated that we found that, not that it didn't help, but it was a tough go, right? So we worked with the bully as well, but the victim could really rise a lot quicker than the bully could go down. But then we said, wait a minute, what's the missing piece here? What are we not seeing? And it was the onlookers. And so I don't care how big and bad and tough the bully is. If you get 4, 5, 7, 10, 20 onlookers to say, as my wife says, the Kimbe Natumbo, no more. You're not going to bully all that person, because you're going to have to deal with all of us. Then they were like, whoa, wait a minute. And so that's when the bully would stop, and a lot of times in their tracks. But we had to go give them even extra help with the bully at that point once we got on the stop, because the reality is they didn't know, that was the only way they knew how to survive, is to be a bully. So now what's the downside of that? Well, if you're not used to not being able to do that anymore, how do you survive? And that could go down a really bad rabbit hole. So that's when we could go to them, because it's just like a 12-step program, right? I first have to say, hi, I'm Brett, I'm an alcoholic. If I don't ever say that, then I can't move through that 12-step program. And we've created a whole model on that we call patterns of change, right? It starts with awareness, and then you go to the knowledge part of it, and then you go to action. So we call that the AKA. And then we go, the next part of it is the C, and we go, anybody can get riled up and get committed for 30, 60, 90 days. And the last part of that step is sustainability. And so you have to make a choice on each one of those to be able to sustain it, because it's real easy to fall back into the known behavior, whether that's known good behavior or bad behavior. That's why when the police officer takes the drug addict child from the mom, the drug addict child wants to go back to the mom, because that's what they know. So whether it's a known great thing or whether it's a known negative thing, it's known. And so you got to really reverse. I call it the cassettes, and everybody's like, "What's a cassette?" Because now they have CDs and now they have MP3. I don't know all that stuff, but back in the day we had cassettes and 8-track tapes. But a cassette was, what are you playing in your mind on a regular basis? What's the story that you're telling yourself? And that's why I say, going back to earlier, we need to be able to identify our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own emotions, and try to nip them in the bud so that we don't go down that rabbit hole that could get us into deep trouble. So that was a great program, by the way. I think they adopted that nationally. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, it was, and now bullying is a common topic, right? But it certainly wasn't when we started that. And I think that it's important. You have to know, and you have to be able to recognize, and you need that onlooker group is so much. Can be so powerful, and it will reverse the bully usually, and it will embolden the victim. So that onlooker group is huge. So Robert, we have got 2 minutes, so give us a quick one.
How can I encourage positive self-talk in youth?
One of the things that I've done before as an exercise is so sometimes it's hard for you people to talk good about themselves, right? They just don't like to do that. So if you do an exercise where you give kids a piece of paper, little strip of paper, for enough for every kid in the classroom, and they have to write a compliment, something good about every single person, and you model it and you talk about it and what it is, and they write the name of the person it's for, and then they write on the strip of paper something they're grateful for, something they think that person does really well. Anyway, they get compliments. You need to have them give them to you before you have them give them to the other kids, so that you can review to make sure that it's not saying something like, well, at least you're not an axe murderer. You want to be sure that it's truly a compliment. But then you can give all of those compliments or those pieces of gratitude, or this is how I see you in a positive way, strips to one person, and that can begin their self-talk. And it will allow them to realize that someone else sees them that way. And so maybe they can start giving themselves some self-talk. But that's a quick way that you can generate positive self-talk, especially when kids don't know how to do that.
Okay, you took my time, and I have a really good thing for it. So
Then you should say it.
I'm going to say it, I'm not going to do it justice. But here's the long story short. Every time you have a negative thought, just don't verbalize it. And so this was a study. So Alabama, who won several national championships, they had a guy that went in and they did all of the studies you could possibly imagine. And by just that one thing, by not verbalizing anything that was negative, that's when they really start. I mean, he was a great coach too, but Saban, but the other guy really helped that to go. And he became a national class speaker on this. So you're going to think whatever the thoughts you're going to think, but if you just don't verbalize it, then I forget the percentage, but it was like 30-50% chance that you have to, be more positive. And it was proven out scientifically. So if I have more time, I get more into it, but you guys can look that up. That Alabama, I think he actually passed away, but just don't verbalize anything negative. You can think whatever.
Absolutely. And that's hard, right? We sometimes get the ain't it awful blues. So it's 7:01 by the clock. And thank you for bearing with us for an extra minute. Thank you for showing up. We appreciate that. And we'll see you next week. We'll be interested in talking with you on Tuesday, April